Number at this time on a Saturday morning. We're very fortunate to have the company of the great Leith Van Onselen, Chief Economist at the MB Fund at MB Super, the Treasury of Common Sense. I'm delighted to say that Leith Van Onselen is on the line. Are you well?
Yeah, good, thanks, Luke. How about yourself?
Very well, mate. Nice to catch up with you again. Again, we've got to repeat this story because, you know, we get new data and we're able to develop this. I have to say, mate, I had a chat with the new Shadow Home Affairs Minister, Senator John O'Doniam, an hour ago, and he was as plain talking and as sensible as I've heard in this area, so he might be one to watch. But nonetheless, we begin again. Our housing shortage is worsening and overseas arrivals numbers are on the way up.
Yeah, mate, look, it really does sound like the Groundhog Day, doesn't it?
It does.
It seems to be every quarter we get these results and it just keeps getting worse. And indeed, so the Australian Bureau of Statistics on Wednesday, they released the dwelling construction data for the June quarter. So this is data on dwelling commencements, so homes that have started construction, and completions, i.e. homes that have finished construction. And the number of dwellings that were commenced in the June quarter, which is the latest data, fell by 4.4%, whereas the number of homes that completed construction plummeted by 6.5% over the quarter. And it was actually the weakest quarter of dwelling completions, so number of homes built for 11 years. So you're going to go all the way back to the March quarter of 2024 to find as weak a result. Sorry, 2014, I should say. Over the 2025 financial year, so the financial year just gone, dwelling completions fell by 2% versus the same time last year to just 174,000. So instead of construction rates going up last financial year compared to the previous one, they actually fell. And this meant that over the first year of the Housing Accord, so listeners might remember the Albanese government set a target to build 1.2 million homes over 5 years. Now that requires 240,000 homes to be built. So we're 1 year into that now. And in the first year, we only built 174,000 versus 240,000. And that means that we're behind by about 65,000 already, just 27% behind. It also means that if we're going to meet this fantastical target, we need to build 256,000 homes over the next 4 years to catch up. Now, that's obviously not going to happen. It was always a fantasy. And there's multiple reasons why it's not going to happen, because interest rates are obviously structurally higher than they were previously. We've got construction costs have risen by about 40% since the pandemic. So just the cost of bricks and everything else that goes into building a house is more expensive. The cost of land to put the houses on has gone up by about a third since the pandemic. And then we've got massive labour shortages across the whole supply chain, and we've seen lots of home builders go bankrupt and belly up and leave. So basically, we've got less builders to actually build the stuff that we need. And to add further insult to injury, the leading property developer, Mirvac, on Friday, a senior executive there warned that he's actually expecting a construction downturn next year. And he said that crews are actually laying off staff. So that doesn't exactly augur very well, does it?
No.
And the AFR also reported this week that Australia's facing a chronic shortage of apprentices. Now, we already knew that, but just around 10,000 people completed an apprenticeship the first quarter of this year, which is the lowest figure in a decade. And we obviously need more people to actually build homes. And the biggest decline was actually in the construction area of apprenticeships, which is obviously what we need, right? So the housing supply situation keeps getting worse. And at the same time, the ABS also released their net permanent long-term arrivals data for August. And once again, it revealed that we've seen a record number of net permanent long-term arrivals over the first 8 months of this year. So they're actually up about 6.4% or 23,000 on the same time last year. That was a record.
Just a sec on that, mate. Didn't we get the ABS not happy with your reporting of previous numbers, which you made clear was indicative, nothing else? Weren't they a little bit put out by some suggestion that numbers might be increasing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So they said that, you shouldn't quote this as migration. Well, I'm not. I'm calling it net permanent long-term arrivals. But the fact of the matter is, if you go back 30-plus years of history, the two series track each other very closely. So not in a number sense. So the raw numbers aren't the same, but in a directional sense, they track each other. And the fact of the matter is, we've seen net permanent long-term arrivals rocket this year so far, and that would suggest to you that net overseas migration is also going to rise, or at least as is not falling like the government promised.
Yes.
And I'm not the only one to say this. Alan Kohler came out in the ABC this week and said the same thing. Even Avril Risby, who's been very critical of me and others, has used this number as a leading indicator. The Centre for Population uses it as a leading indicator. So, I mean, it's the data we've got. It's tracked it for 30 years. I don't see why suddenly it's going to stop, in a directional sense, tracking net overseas migration. So it's a bit farcical. But the fact of the matter is, it looks like migration has picked up. And this has actually been, I argue, reflected in the rental market because according to Cotality and XQM Research, etc., Cotality in their latest report for September showed that the rental vacancy rate nationally has fallen to a new record low, right? So it's the lowest in recorded history in September. And the number of homes listed for rent in Australia, so this is in a rate terms, is in number terms, is the lowest on record. And now asking rents, so advertised rents, are now rising again and rising quite quickly. And this comes after a 44% increase in the last 5 years of advertised rents, which has seen the typical renter in Australia, the median renter, pay $10,500 roughly more annually to rent a home than they were at the start of the pandemic. So, we've got this bottleneck supply. At the same time, it looks like migration is picking up again. And then we've got record low rental vacancy rates, and now we've got rents accelerating again. I mean, join the dots here.
Yes.
We're importing far more people than we can build houses for. It's pretty obvious.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the rental crisis is just going to continue to worsen if we keep pumping demand at the same time as we can't build enough homes. It's pretty simple stuff, isn't it?
It really is, mate. And, when the only response from government, because they get out in the front foot and say, we've got the housing accord, we're building homes, and I think they were pressed in the parliament this week or last week, how many homes have been completed, and all they can do is talk about homes that have commenced. In other words, the number of completions is, from what I've witnessed anyway, near enough or close to zero. So their answer is, how many homes have you got? The answer is, but we've got a plan. So, they've failed on that. They set out the ABS and others to attack people like Leith, who are saying, well, hang on, these numbers don't look good in terms of moderating immigration. Well, they've failed on that given the numbers we've seen today. And the people paying the price are the people of Australia who want to rent a place and now find record low numbers of available rentals and are now paying upwards of 10 grand more than they might have 5 years ago. And the government can't say to put that argument makes you a racist. It doesn't. To put that argument means you understand what rents going up means, what the low availability of rental properties means, and what increasing population means. People have to join the bloody dots. And don't just sit there and cop the stuff that says, if you talk about that, you're a racist. You're not. You care about the joint, perhaps more so than government. Do we have a clown this week, or do we have a hero?
Unfortunately, it's not a clown, mate.
Oh, clown. Jeez. Righto, mate. Well, tell me about the clown.
Okay, so my clown of the week is the Grattan Institute, which is a think tank. Now, the Grattan Institute's the same mob who in 2013 lobbied vigorously against East Coast gas reservation policy. They were massive lobbyists against it. And we all know how that turned out, right? We ended up not reserving our gas on the East Coast, and as a result, we pay, we've got domestic shortages, even though we export nearly 3/4 of it, and we pay the highest gas prices in the world of any gas exporting jurisdiction. Well, this week, the Grattan Institute released some dodgy modelling that claimed that Australia's household power bills are going to, quote, halve by 2050 as Australia heads to net zero. So Grattan claims that because most households in 2050 will have, quote, solar panels on their roof, a battery in the shed, electric car in the garage, and all electric appliances in the home, we're going to magically, halve our power bills, and we're all going to be, living in this fantasy land. Now, I argue the analysis is absolutely laughable because it ignores the enormous capital costs of retrofitting everyone's homes, as well as the humongous increase in power bills and subsidies that will be required to build out Australia's energy infrastructure to accommodate an all-renewable and electric future. Now, I've actually done this exercise. About a year or so ago, I examined the cost of retrofitting my house to be all electric. So I live in Victoria, so it's heavily gas dependent. I've got gas ducted heating. I had gas cooking. I got gas water heating, all this sort of stuff. And the cost of switching my gas ducted heating and evaporative cooling to a central electric heating cooling system using a heat pump, switching from gas hot water to gas electric water heating, installing a large solar array with batteries, all that sort of stuff, was going to cost just over $50,000, Luke.
50,000, right?
Yeah, 50,000. That's even with subsidies, right? So, since that money would have to come out of my mortgage offset account, I'd be paying my mortgage interest rate on it, right? Which is about 5.25%. So the interest cost alone, let alone the principal, would be $2,600 a year of just to retrofit my house, right? To meet this thing. Why aren't those costs incorporated in modelling? Because that is a direct cost, and it obviously offset any power savings. And the same can be said about EVs, which are more expensive up front to buy. They cost a lot more to insure. They depreciate heavily in value, and they're likely to need to be replaced more often because the batteries fail, and they're unlikely. Every car I've owned, internal combustion engine, has lasted 20 years. I don't think an EV is going to last 20 years. Probably last 10 max, and you have to turn it over, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you've also got to factor in the costs of retrofitting the entire electricity grid to be able to cope with 15 million EVs on Australia's road, which is the number that Grattan uses, right? So Australia would need to install new high-tension transmission lines everywhere, across every suburb. We need new transformers. We need new substations so we have enough power throughput to be able to charge all these things. The capital costs would be absolutely gigantic, and they need to be funded. And Grattan has effectively ignored these humongous costs by only focusing on your yearly bill, which they wrongly assume is set by the wholesale electricity price, when in fact it's actually set by a combination of your wholesale bills and network costs. And the network costs are the things that are going to go through the roof as we do this renewable future. So there was a report by a mob called Net Zero Australia, which came out in 2023. Now, this is a consortium of University of Melbourne, University of Queensland, Princeton University, and some others, and they estimated that to meet Australia's net zero goals by 2050, we need capital investment of between $7 trillion and $9 trillion. Right? Now, these costs have got to be paid for. Like, it's not free. You can't go... What Grattan's effectively done is, if you own your home outright, it's cheaper than renting, but ignoring the cost of your house. Right? So it's laughable stuff here, because these costs have got to be paid for, and they're going to either be paid for through our bills, in terms of network costs, which are going to get added to our bills, or through our taxes, i.e. via subsidies. Like Snowy Hydro is going to probably end up costing about $25 billion once you factor in transmission. That's the federal government's taking that on, which means we're taking it on through our taxes. None of this stuff is free. And this is why global power bills globally, Luke, have risen in line with the increase in share of wind and solar. So as countries have increased their wind and solar share, power bills have gone up because the transmission cost of this stuff is huge, and it must be paid for. And we only have to look at South Australia, which has the highest share of wind and solar in Australia. That's more than 75%. They have the most expensive power bills in the country. Or you can look at California. In short, Grattan's analysis is flimsy. Its modelling is dodgy. It doesn't pass the pub test, and it's akin to when Albo told us, in 2022, that our power bills would fall by $275 a year by 2025, i.e. now. But instead, prices have gone up. And in the real world, power bills and the cost of living continue to rise. Because we live in the real world, Luke.
That's exactly right. And, of course, to recount one's lived experience, what would we know? It's shameful. Got to go, mate. Great stuff. Macrobusiness.com.au. I'll talk to you in a week's time. Leith Van Onselen. And just on that before the break, the CEO of an energy company in Britain, now remember this, the CEO of an energy company in Britain told Parliament that if wholesale gas prices were zero in 2030, electricity prices would remain where they are today because of policy and systems costs. You get to the point where if gas was free, in the UK this is, if gas was free, your bill would still be the same. Now, tell me how that makes sense. Absolute joke.